Ever play Monopoly?
Oh, yeah. Who hasn't?
You know the get out of jail free card,
Yeah,
the
definitely.
one
Yeah.
that lets you kind of like skip the consequences?
Right. A total game changer.
Well, this opinion piece, the Great Get Pardon, why Joe Biden should let everyone out of Blackgate prisons. It takes that idea
Oh,
and
interesting.
applies it to something much bigger, the whole justice system. It's the deep dive for today.
I'm intrigued. And Blackgate prisons. That sounds pretty
Yeah,
intense.
we'll get to that. But first, like, what's the author's main point?
Well, they're using this monopoly analogy to say
Okay.
that, well, life, especially when you're dealing with the legal system, it's not always fair. Not everyone's playing on a level playing field.
Right. They're pretty upfront about thinking that the super rich,
Yeah.
the powerful,
Mm-hmm.
they're playing by a whole different set of rules.
Exactly. And they bring up Hunter Biden's pardon as a perfect example. Now, presidential pardons, they've always been kind of controversial, right?
Yeah.
It's basically a power the president has to like excuse someone from a federal crime.
Okay.
Throughout history, I mean, they've been used for all sorts of reasons. Showing mercy, sometimes navigating like political landmines.
But in this case,
Uh-huh.
our author sees Hunter Biden's pardon
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as a sign of a system that's like totally rigged,
Yeah.
favors the privileged.
Right. A system where like who you know
Mm.
and what kind of resources you got,
Yeah.
that's what really matters.
And that's where the whole Blackgate prisons thing comes in.
Right. What is that all about? Some kind of like Supermax thing?
Not exactly. The author's not talking about a literal place. It's more like a feeling, like being trapped
I see.
by this system that just feels rigged against you.
Makes sense.
They even go as far as to say, like, sarcastically,
Oh, I like where this is going.
if Hunter Biden gets a get-out-of-jail-free card,
Yeah,
shouldn't everyone stuck in these, like, metaphorical Blackgate prisons get one too?
I see. So it's less about a physical place and more about like systemic injustices that everyday folks face.
Exactly. Things like mandatory minimum sentences, where
Oh,
someone might get hit with this super harsh sentence for a nonviolent offense.
gotcha.
To the author, that's a Blackgate prison. This sentence, you can't escape.
And it disproportionately impacts certain groups,
You
right?
got it. And the author's not mincing words here.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Their tone is pretty sharp, a lot of sarcasm.
Yeah.
They're calling it out, the absurdity.
So they're using humor to kind of drive home the point.
Totally. At one point, they even joke about Biden, like, releasing everyone from Blackgate prisons and maybe getting us all a free iced coffee while he's at it.
Okay, that's funny. But
Yeah.
it also makes you think, like, is this really how justice is supposed to work?
Exactly.
Should your ability to navigate the legal system just depend on your wealth and connections?
That's the question.
Yeah.
And it feels like they're trying to make us confront that, right? Like, why do some people seemingly get off easy while others get slammed for doing similar stuff?
The author's tapping into this frustration that honestly a lot of people feel.
Yeah.
It's like the system isn't always fair. The scales aren't balanced.
And it seems like they're really pushing us as readers to face that uncomfortable truth.
Yeah, and that's what makes this piece so interesting. It's not just complaining. It's like a call to action.
Okay.
To look at these disparities and think about, like, what would a truly fair justice system actually look like?
So we got the central analogy
Right.
and the humor,
Yeah.
but what about the specifics? Like, what exactly are these systemic injustices they're talking about?
Let's dig into that a bit more.
We keep coming back to this Blackgate prisons idea and how it kind of represents a system that just feels stacked against the average person.
Right.
But what are, like, some actual examples?
Yeah.
Real world stuff that shows what the author's getting at.
Well, one thing they kind of touch on, even if it's subtle,
Okay.
is this whole disparity in legal representation.
Like,
Imagine, right, two people
Mhm.
facing pretty similar charges.
Yeah.
One's got, like, this high-powered legal team they can afford.
Mhm.
The other has to rely on a public defender who's probably swamped with cases.
Oh, yeah.
Their outcomes could be totally different,
Wow.
even if the facts of the case are similar,
crazy.
just because of how good their lawyer is.
That's like what we were saying before about the ultra-wealthy having this built-in advantage.
Yeah, like they're playing the justice system game
Yeah,
with a deck that's totally stacked in their favor.
exactly. And the author seems to be saying that this whole lawyer thing,
Right.
it's just one part of this bigger system
Oh, yeah.
that's keeping things unequal.
It's not just like a few bad apples.
Yeah.
It's the whole structure that's messed up.
Totally. They also bring up prosecutorial discretion, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. How prosecutors get to decide who to charge,
Mm-hmm.
what sentences to go for.
Right. And the author seems worried that
Yeah.
even though discretion is needed sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
it can also make biases worse.
Exactly. Like, there are studies showing that prosecutors,
Really?
yeah, they're more likely to push for harsher sentences
Wow.
when the defendant is a person of color,
No, what?
even if the crimes are practically the same.
And they tie this back to
Yeah.
the Hunter Biden case. Like,
Mhm.
if someone with his connections,
Right, and resources.
gets this sweet deal,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that kind of raise questions about whether everyone's actually getting equal treatment under the law?
It makes you wonder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is justice really blind like we say it is?
Yeah.
Or does it, like, peek through the cracks and favor certain people?
It's like the author's calling us out,
Yeah.
making us ask if the system's actually living up to what it's supposed to be.
They even kind of suggest
Yeah.
that maybe everyone deserves a little get-out-of-jail-free action.
Right. Like, they're being sarcastic,
Right.
but it makes you wonder if we're too focused on punishment.
Especially for stuff that's not violent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, is it really working?
That's a huge point.
Yeah.
The author's making us rethink how we approach this whole justice thing.
Okay.
Like, maybe we should focus more on helping people.
Rehab, right.
Yeah, giving them second chances instead of just locking them up.
But isn't there a risk in being too lenient?
Oh, for sure.
Like, what about people being held accountable for messing up?
That's a real concern.
Yeah.
And it's something we got to wrestle with.
Mm-hmm.
But the author's really making us think about the human cost of how things are now. You know, all the overcrowded prisons,
Yeah.
families getting torn apart,
Right.
people stuck in this cycle of poverty and going back to jail.
It makes you wonder if at some point punishment stops being about justice
Yeah,
and just starts causing more harm.
exactly. Honestly,
Yeah.
sometimes the author's cynicism
I know what you mean.
and how they kind of poke fun at the system, it makes it hard to take them seriously.
Yeah, it's like,
But that's how satire works, right? It
Yeah,
can
they
be
really-
smart and dismissive all at once.
Yep.
But I think we got to look past the tone and really get what they're critiquing.
you're right.
They're pointing out real problems,
Uh-huh.
power imbalances, biases baked into the system,
Yeah.
this need to find a way to make justice actually fair.
And even if you don't agree with their answers,
Yeah.
just the fact they're making us ask these questions,
isn't
face these hard truths.
That's valuable in itself.
Yeah.
The author's starting a conversation,
Uh-huh.
challenging how things are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how things change.
Right.
You to question stuff, look at different points of view.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we're going to take the author seriously, even just for a minute,
Mm.
what would a more fair system actually look like?
Mm.
How do we make things level
Yeah.
so everyone has a real shot at justice?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think the author would say it starts with admitting what's wrong with how things are now,
Okay.
recognizing that biases exist,
Uh-huh.
that power messes with outcomes,
Right?
and that how we punish people,
Yeah.
it often does more harm than good.
So they're not just complaining.
Yep.
They're actually trying to offer solutions,
Exactly.
even if it's through satire
Yeah.
and kind of provocative stuff.
That's where we'll pick up in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll look at some of the solutions they suggest
Mhm.
and think about what actual steps we could take
Okay.
to make the justice system actually live up to its name.
Okay, so we've spent a good amount of time
Yeah.
on the author's critiques
Uh-huh.
of the justice system.
Right.
But they do offer some potential fixes, right?
They do. It's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, it's not just like everything's broken.
Exactly. Remember their main point.
About the get out of jail free card.
Yeah, if Hunter Biden gets one,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we should think about offering that kind of chance to other people
Right.
who are, caught up in the system.
Right, right.
Obviously, they're not saying empty the prisons,
Yeah.
but they are pushing us to, reimagine how we do justice.
So what are they actually suggesting?
Well, one thing they touch on
Sure.
is investing more in, rehabilitation programs.
So instead of just
Yeah.
locking people up in these,
Right. Blackgate prisons.
we should focus on helping them get back on their feet.
Exactly. Give them support, resources, that kind of thing.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If someone's dealing with addiction
Mm-hmm.
or mental health stuff, just throwing them in jail doesn't really solve the problem.
Nope, it just puts a Band-Aid on it.
Right.
The author wants us to look at the whole picture,
Okay.
recognize that people's actions
Right.
They often stem from deeper issues.
And that punishment alone isn't enough.
It's not about just punishing people. It's
Yeah.
about understanding them, helping them.
Right. Give them a real chance to turn things around.
Exactly. Remember that line about the ultra-wealthy?
The flip and the bird line.
Yeah, that one. It shows they also want more transparency
Oh, I see.
and accountability within the system.
Like making sure everyone's playing by the same rules.
Exactly. They want mechanisms in place to hold those in power accountable.
So whether it's independent investigations,
Right.
stricter ethical guidelines,
Yeah.
or just more public scrutiny, they want to make sure the system isn't rigged.
It can't just favor the privileged few.
That's a tall order, though. Right.
It is.
Like changing a system this big, it feels almost impossible.
It's definitely a challenge. But the author's point is, we got to start somewhere
Okay.
by talking about these issues, by using satire to get people thinking. They're planting seeds for change.
Even if their solutions aren't, like, perfect.
Yeah, they're getting us to confront the reality,
Yeah.
to imagine a fairer system.
It's like a starting point.
Exactly. They're also calling on all of us
Okay.
to be more involved.
Not just, like, sit back and watch.
Exactly. It's not enough to just read this piece and be like, yeah, I agree, or nah, I don't.
Right.
We got to do something with what we've learned.
So it's a challenge to all of us.
It is. And that's the power of a piece like this, you know? It gets you thinking.
Makes you question things.
And hopefully it pushes you to act.
And that's what we hope we've done with this deep dive.
We've taken you inside the author's head.
Yeah.
We've looked at their arguments.
Broken it all down.
And explored some solution.
Now it's up to you to figure out what resonates with you.
What you agree with.
And what you want to do about it.
So, to wrap up this deep dive, if life really is a game, like the author says, let's make it a game where everyone has a fair shot.
A game where justice is truly blind.
But the rules are the same for everyone.
And fairness drives every decision.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a good one.
We hope you keep exploring these issues.
Keep having these important conversations.
And be a part of creating a more just world.
Thanks for listening, everybody.